The silver watch lay untouched in its elegant box on my father's gift table, its inscription hidden beneath custom wrapping. To new beginnings, love Vanessa. 3 hours into his retirement party, he still hadn't opened it. I stood at the edge of the garden, champagne glass in hand, watching relatives who had ignored me for years suddenly orbiting around me like planets discovering a new sun. The red Jaguar type I'd parked prominently in the driveway had done its job, announcing my arrival as someone worth noticing. CEO of a $90 million company. The daughter they never thought would amount to anything. Vanessa. My brother Logan approached, his confident smile not quite reaching his eyes. Quite an entrance, sis. Nice car. Thanks, I replied, the champagne tasting suddenly bitter on my tongue. Business must be treating you well too. Mom mentioned a promotion to vice president. Congratulations. How strange that we could stand here making pleasant conversation, as if he hadn't witnessed every dismissal, every useless girl comment our father had thrown my way since childhood. As if he hadn't benefited from every comparison. My father caught my eye from across the lawn, his expression unreadable. 31 years of seeking approval from those stern eyes, and today was the first time I'd seen something new there. Uncertainty. The breaking point. You were never the bright one, my father had said 3 months earlier, his voice carrying across the living room where my relatives sat sipping their drinks and pretending not to hear. I stood frozen, the regional business competition award certificate clutched in my hand. The familiar sting of his dismissal hit me like it always did, a paper cut that never quite healed, reopened over and over. But this time, something different followed. Anger, rising hot and unstoppable. I excused myself to the kitchen, leaned against the counter, and took deep breaths. My phone buzzed with a text from my business partner Eliza. Did you tell them about the investor meeting? I typed back, not yet. Timing's not right. What I didn't say was that the timing would never be right in this house. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see my father clapping my brother on the shoulder, a gesture I couldn't remember ever receiving. The family portrait was perfect without me in it. Robert Graves, retired engineer and self-proclaimed business expert. His golden son Logan, corporate success story. My silent, appeasing mother, and various relatives nodding in admiration at whatever story my brother was telling. I straightened my shoulders and returned to the living room with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Little did they know that their dismissal was fueling something inside me, something that would soon force them all to see me very differently. The company, NeuroSync, had started as nothing more than an idea sketched on napkins during my lunch breaks at my previous corporate job. Now we occupied half a floor in a renovated warehouse on the edge of downtown Columbus with 15 employees and technology that was beginning to make waves in the predictive analytics field. That bad, huh? Eliza asked the next morning, sliding a coffee across her desk toward me. She could read my family dinners on my face by now. Same story, different day, I replied, taking the cup gratefully. Logan secured some contract with the state government, and you'd think he'd single-handedly solved world hunger. And meanwhile, we're just over here revolutionizing how businesses understand consumer behavior. Nothing important. Eliza rolled her eyes. I smiled despite myself. This was why we worked so well together. She understood both the technology and the weight of constant underestimation. The investor meeting is confirmed for Thursday, she continued. Westlake Ventures wants to see the new algorithm in action. When it goes well, I corrected her automatic if. We'll have the capital to scale up and take on Horizon Data directly. Horizon Data, our main competitor, larger and more established. The same company that had rejected my job application 4 years ago with a suggestion that I look into something less technical. Their rejection letter still sat in my desk drawer, a constant reminder. The past, my father's dismissive words had roots going back to my childhood. Growing up in Columbus, Ohio, in the shadow of my brother had been an exercise in invisibility. Logan was a golden child, his academic achievements, athletic trophies, and later his business ventures celebrated with enthusiasm and pride. My accomplishments were brushed aside like crumbs from a dinner table. I remember coming home excited about being selected for an exclusive tech internship, only to have my father wave it off and ask when I was going to find a real career path. When I made the dean's list studying computer science, My mother merely noted that it must be getting easier these days. My father came from a generation and background where he'd worked his way up through sheer force of will. The son of a factory worker, he'd earned his engineering degree at night while working days, married my mother when they were both 22, and never looked back. Success to him looked like Logan, corporate, predictable, respectable. Not like me, the dreamer with impractical ideas and emotions that showed too easily. I had learned to stop sharing with them, to keep my dreams and achievements tucked away where they couldn't be diminished. But some childish part of me had never stopped hoping for that nod of approval, that moment of pride in their eyes. The pitch. The conference room at Westlake Ventures felt too warm despite the sleek air conditioning units humming quietly overhead. I adjusted my blazer and glanced at Eliza, who gave me a subtle nod. We had practiced this presentation a dozen times, but the stakes had never been higher. As you can see from our projections, I continued, gesturing to the screen behind me. NeuroSync's algorithm has consistently outperformed market standards by 27%. What this means for retail implementation is an unprecedented level of customer behavior prediction. Gregory Westlake, the silver-haired founder of the venture capital firm, leaned forward slightly. And your competitors? How does Horizon Data's new platform compare? I had anticipated this question. Horizon's approach relies on historical data sets. Our algorithm incorporates real-time emotional response indicators. Simply put, they can tell you what customers did yesterday. We can tell you what they'll do tomorrow. The room shifted. I could feel the energy change as the investors exchanged glances. This was the moment, the tipping point I had been working toward for years. For 3 years, I had lived in a tiny apartment, eating ramen noodles and pouring every dollar back into NeuroSync. I worked 18-hour days, read every business book I could find, and learned from every mistake, all while hearing my father's voice in my head. Useless girl. You were never the bright one. 2 hours later, Eliza and I stood in the lobby, still in shock. Westlake had not only agreed to invest, they wanted to lead a funding round that would value NeuroSync at $90 million. The deal would transform our company overnight and position us as the industry leader in consumer predictive technology. We did it, Eliza whispered, her usual composure cracking as a grin spread across her face. Vanessa, we actually did it. I nodded, a strange numbness replacing the adrenaline that had carried me through the meeting. Success felt different than I'd imagined, less like a triumphant shout and more like a quiet certainty settling into my bones. My phone rang, interrupting my mental list-making. It was my mother. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but some old habit made me answer. Hello, Vanessa. Don't forget your father's retirement party is next Sunday. The whole family will be there, and it would look strange if you weren't. You know how people talk. The contrast was so stark it was almost comical. In one moment, I was negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal that would change the face of an industry. In the next, I was being asked to remember a family obligation where, once again, I would be peripheral. Actually, Mom, I might have some news of my own to share by then. That's nice, dear. Just remember your father doesn't like anything too sweet. The doctor says his blood sugar. As she continued, I caught Eliza's eye. She raised an eyebrow questioningly, and I just shook my head slightly. Some things never changed. But I was about to. The headlines. Thursday morning, I was reviewing the final investment documents when Eliza burst into my office, her typically composed demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. Have you seen it? She demanded, thrusting her tablet toward me. I looked up, bleary-eyed from poring over legal language. Seen what? Forbes, Business Insider, The Wall Street Journal. They're all running the story. I took the tablet, and there it was, my face staring back at me from the Forbes website. The headline read, Disruptor Alert. Vanessa Graves named youngest female CEO in tech after landmark investment deal. My stomach dropped. The announcement wasn't supposed to go public until next week, after all the paperwork was finalized, and after I'd had a chance to tell my family in person. I quickly scanned the article, which detailed the investment deal and highlighted my journey from startup founder to CEO of what was now being called the most exciting tech firm in the Midwest. Everyone would see it, including my family. As if summoned by my thought, My phone began to vibrate with incoming messages. Colleagues, old classmates, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all suddenly aware of my success. But nothing from my parents or Logan. The silence from them was deafening. "This is huge," Eliza said, reclaiming her tablet. "We should celebrate." I nodded absently, still processing the implications. "We will, but first I need to make a call." After Liza left, I dialed my parents' number, expecting my mother's usual cheerful greeting. Instead, my father answered, his voice clipped. "Graves residence." "Dad, it's me. I I suppose you think we'd be impressed," he interrupted, making a spectacle in the business pages. I blinked, taken aback. That wasn't intentional. The announcement went out early. "Logan's been working for years to build a respectable career, step by step. But you always needed to make a show of things, didn't you?" The familiar sting of his dismissal hit, but this time the anger that followed wasn't hot. It was cold and clarifying. I gripped the phone tighter. "A show? Dad, I built this company from nothing. No connections, no family support, not even a word of encouragement. And now you've got your name in some articles. Congratulations. We'll see how long it lasts before reality sets in. The reality is that I'm now the CEO of a $90 million company that's changing the industry. That's not just some articles. Listen to me," he said, his voice lowering to that tone he used when he thought he was imparting wisdom. "This tech bubble you're riding will burst. It always does. Logan's built something solid, something real." I closed my eyes, suddenly tired of the same old narrative. "Dad, I have to go. I'll see you at the retirement party on Sunday." "Vanessa," he started, but I had already hung up. I sat in silence for a moment, then reached for my laptop. If my family couldn't see my worth, perhaps it was time to show them in a way they couldn't ignore. The car. That Saturday, I walked into the Jaguar dealership in downtown Columbus. The salesman approached with a practiced smile that faltered slightly when I pointed to the F-Type in gleaming red on the showroom floor. "That one," I said simply. "Excellent choice," he recovered smoothly. "Would you like to see some of our more practical options as well? The sedan, perhaps?" I met his eyes directly. "I'm interested in the F-Type, the V8. 2 hours later, I drove off the lot in my new car, the engine purring with a power that seemed to vibrate through my bones. It was extravagant, impractical, and exactly what I wanted. Not because I needed it, but because for once in my life, I could choose something purely because it brought me joy. As I navigated through traffic, I thought about my father's retirement party tomorrow. The car was a statement, yes, but not the childish one my father would assume. It wasn't, "Look at me." It was, "I am here. I have always been here. You just refuse to see me." The party Sunday arrived, warm and clear, a perfect early summer day for an outdoor retirement celebration. I sat in my car outside my parents' suburban home, watching guests arrive. Relatives, my father's former colleagues, neighbors, and family friends, all people who had witnessed my relegation to the background over the years. With a deep breath, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusted my designer sunglasses, and stepped out of the Jaguar. The sleek vehicle, with its gleaming red exterior and purring engine, was not subtle, nor was it meant to be. As I retrieved the small, elegantly wrapped package from the passenger's seat, I felt eyes turning in my direction. Cousin Drew, always the first to notice anything automotive, stopped mid-conversation, his mouth slightly open. "Is that Vanessa?" I smiled and handed him the keys. "Mind parking it for me? The driveway is getting crowded." His eyes widened as he took the keys, treating them like precious artifacts. "This is the V8, right?" The sound is unmistakable. "Goodyear," I replied, enjoying the way the small crowd by the garage had turned to stare. "Just be careful with the trim. It's custom." I made my way toward the backyard, where tables had been set up on the lawn. My mother spotted me first, her greeting freezing on her lips as she took in my appearance. Gone was the practical, understated daughter they were used to. Today, I wore a tailored cream suit with a bold blue silk blouse, designer heels, and jewelry that quietly spoke of success. "Vanessa," she managed finally. You look different. Thank you, I said, kissing her cheek. Where's Dad? I brought him something. She gestured toward the grill, where my father stood in his element, surrounded by male relatives and friends hanging on his every grilling tip. I approached the group, conscious of the conversation dying down as I neared. Dad, I said, extending the small package. Happy retirement. He turned, his expression unreadable as he took in my transformation. For a moment, I thought he might make a scene or dismiss me again. Instead, he accepted the gift with a nod. You didn't need to bring anything, he said stiffly. I wanted to, I replied, maintaining eye contact. After all, it's not every day my father retires after 30 years. The men around us watched this exchange with interest, several of them clearly having read the recent articles about me. I could see recognition in their eyes, followed by confusion as they observed the cool interaction between us. Well, my father said, making no move to open the gift. I should get back to these steaks before they burn. Of course, I said, smiling politely. We wouldn't want that. As I turned to walk away, I heard one of his friends say, Bob, isn't that your daughter who's been in the news? The CO? I didn't stay to hear his response. The present. Now, hours into the party, I watched as the dynamics had shifted palpably. Relatives who had previously gravitated toward Logan now sought me out, asking about NeuroSync, about what it was like to be featured in Forbes, about my secrets to success. I answered graciously, but with a professional distance that was new to our family gatherings. My father remained by the grill, his domain, watching this transformation of his usually overlooked daughter with an expression I couldn't quite read. He had still not opened my gift. Eventually, as dessert was being served, my father tapped his glass for attention. The backyard quieted as everyone turned toward him, expecting the retirement speech he had likely been planning for months. Thank you all for coming today, he began, his voice carrying across the yard. Ending a 30-year career is a milestone worth marking, and having you all here means the world to me and Joyce. He continued with anecdotes from his years as an engineer, thanked colleagues who had become friends, and then turned to family acknowledgments. And of course, I'm proud of my children, Logan, who's making his mark at Hamilton Financial, recently promoted to vice president. A polite round of applause followed, Logan nodding appreciatively. And Vanessa, my father continued, his voice faltering slightly as every eye turned to me, who apparently has been quietly building something none of us fully understood. The yard was silent now, the tension palpable. I met my father's gaze steadily, waiting. I always said she was the emotional one, he added with a small laugh that few joined. It seems I may have underestimated how far that emotional intelligence could take her. It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was the first public acknowledgement from my father that he might have been wrong about me. As the gathered family and friends raised their glasses, I saw something new in many of their eyes. Respect. The understanding. As the night progressed, I found a moment alone with my father. He stood at the edge of the yard, nursing a whiskey and gazing at the garden my mother had spent years perfecting. You haven't opened your gift, I said, nodding toward the small package still sitting unopened on the gift table. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I wanted to wait until it was quieter. I nodded, accepting this explanation, though I suspected he simply hadn't wanted to open it in front of everyone after our earlier exchange. So, he said finally, CO? Yes. Of a $90 million company? Yes. And the youngest woman to do it, according to those articles? That's what they say. A long pause followed, filled with decades of misunderstanding and dismissal. I don't understand it, he admitted. This tech stuff. In my day, business was straightforward. Products you could hold, services you could see. I considered explaining how our algorithm worked, how it was revolutionizing an entire industry, but realized it wouldn't matter. This wasn't about understanding my business. It was about him finally seeing me. You don't need to understand the technology, Dad. Just understand that I built something valuable, something lasting. He nodded slowly, then gestured toward the front of the house. That car. That's quite a statement. I smiled. It wasn't meant to be a statement. It was meant to be a reward for years of hard work. Still, he said, his voice lower now. Pulling up like that after all those articles. You knew what you were doing. Yes, I admitted. I did. In his eyes, I could see a complex mix of pride and regret. The watch I had given him, a custom engraved piece bearing the inscription, "To New Beginnings, Love Vanessa," would remain unopened until later. But something had already begun to shift between us, a tiny crack in the wall of his certainty about who I was and what I could achieve. I didn't need his approval anymore. I was Vanessa Graves, CO, visionary, and architect of my own success. But some small part of me, that little girl who had craved her father's nod of approval, felt a quiet satisfaction in the knowledge that he was finally beginning to see me as I truly was. Never useless, always bright, and finally, undeniably successful on my own terms. The complete record. I titled the document, my fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard. The clock on my laptop read 3:47 a.m. Outside my kitchen window, the world was still dark, but inside me, a clarity had dawned that wouldn't let me sleep. I was Ellen Kelly, 54 years old, breast cancer patient, and as of yesterday, former marketing director of Pinnacle Hospitality Group. 20 years of dedication erased in a 20-minute Zoom call. For the last hour, I'd been compiling evidence, performance data, client testimonials, revenue growth figures under my leadership, all contradicting Richard Marcus's claims about my underperformance. I added a timeline of my cancer treatments alongside documentation of projects completed during those same periods. The facts spoke for themselves. No commentary needed. My finger hovered over the send button. The email was addressed to Pinnacle's three major investors. Once sent, there would be no going back. 20 years of professional relationships, of carefully maintained corporate diplomacy, would be forever altered. "What are you doing up?" Michael's voice came softly from the doorway. My husband of 30 years stood there in his faded university t-shirt, concern etched in the lines around his eyes. "Making a decision," I replied, turning the screen slightly so he could see. He moved behind me, placing his hands gently on my shoulders, careful to avoid the spot where the chemo port was still tender. "You're sure?" I nodded, thinking of our son finishing college next year, our daughter just starting her career, and Michael's heart condition that required monthly medication. I thought of the Cobra paperwork showing the $2,000 monthly premium we couldn't possibly afford on just his teacher's salary. "This isn't just about me anymore," I said quietly. I clicked send, and with that simple action, set in motion events that would change everything. Flashback. The termination. 3 days earlier, I sat at my home office desk, preparing for what I thought was a routine budget review. My bright purple headscarf, chosen deliberately for its boldness, covered what remained of my hair after 6 months of chemotherapy. I'd learned that vibrant colors made people less uncomfortable around the visible signs of my illness. "You're not putting in any effort at all," Richard Marcus said, his voice coldly professional through my laptop speakers. "The numbers don't lie. Your productivity metrics have been consistently below target for the past quarter." The Zoom grid showed Richard's impassive face alongside three HR representatives I barely recognized. My stomach tightened, but 20 years of corporate meetings had taught me to keep my expression neutral. "I've maintained all our major client relationships," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Westin Hotels renewed their contract last week. Riverside Properties expanded their order by 30%. Richard sighed, the sound distorted through my speakers. "Relationship management isn't enough. We need people who can drive quantifiable growth. The executive team has made the difficult decision to terminate your employment, effective immediately." The words landed like physical blows. 20 years. 2 decades of my life given to this company. I'd worked through every chemotherapy session, scheduling treatments for Friday afternoons so I could recover over weekends. I hadn't missed a single client deadline, not even on days when the nausea was so severe I could barely stand. "I understand," I said quietly, though I didn't understand at all. "Is there anything else?" Diane from HR stepped in with practiced efficiency. "We'll send your final paycheck next Friday along with information about continuing your health insurance. Your company laptop and phone will be remotely deactivated at the end of this call. Please mail them back within 5 business days." I nodded mechanically, thinking of my family. How would I tell them? How would Michael and I manage the medical bills without my insurance? Thank you for the opportunity. I said automatically, years of professionalism taking over where emotion threatened to break through. I wish you all the best. The meeting ended. I sat motionless, staring at my reflection in the darkened screen. The woman looking back at me seemed like a stranger, pale, shocked, wearing a bright scarf that now seemed absurdly cheerful. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my colleague and closest friend at Pinnacle. Call me now. When I did, her voice was tight with anger. They just announced your termination in the all hands meeting. Richard said you'd been underperforming for months and that they couldn't carry dead weight during a growth phase, Ellen. It was brutal. I felt suddenly cold. This wasn't just a termination, it was character assassination, and I had a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. Flashback: the early days, my journey with Pinnacle Hospitality Group began 20 years ago when I joined as a marketing coordinator, fresh out of graduate school at 34, older than most of my peers after taking time to raise our young children. The company was small then, just 20 employees helping independent hotels compete with major chains. You have a natural talent for this, Thomas Wise, the marketing director at the time, told me after I'd successfully landed our first luxury resort client. You understand people, not just data. Thomas became my mentor. Under his guidance, I thrived, eventually leading a team of 12 and managing our highest value client relationships. When he retired 7 years ago, promoting me was a natural decision. My department consistently delivered results, with client retention rates above 90% and year-over-year revenue growth exceeding targets. I still remember the board meeting where Thomas announced his retirement and recommended me as his replacement. Ellen doesn't just understand marketing, he'd said. She understands that this business is built on relationships, trust, and the long game. Numbers matter, but people matter more. Those words echoed in my mind now as I sat in my car in the parking garage after the termination call, finally allowing the tears to come. I thought of my mother, who'd worked as a hotel housekeeper for 30 years, teaching me that dignity wasn't given by others but maintained from within. Never let them see you break, she'd say. But alone in my car, I broke. 20 years of dedication dismissed in 20 minutes. 6 months of fighting cancer while maintaining my professional responsibilities, all erased with corporate platitudes about productivity metrics. By the time I drove home, I had dried my tears and composed myself. Michael didn't need another worry. His mild heart condition was stable but required monthly medication covered by my health insurance. At home, the aftermath. You're what? Michael looked up from the pasta he was stirring, his face registering disbelief. It was dinner time, and I'd finally found the courage to tell him. Fired. Terminated. Let go. Each synonym felt like tasting a different kind of bitter herb. Michael set down the wooden spoon and embraced me, his artist's hands, slightly stained with blue paint from his afternoon high school art class, strong against my back. Those bastards, he whispered into my hair. After everything you've done for them. After working through chemo. I pulled back to look at him, seeing anger, but also fear in his eyes. Michael had always been the emotional heart of our family, while I was the practical provider. His teaching salary was stable but modest. My income had put our children through college, paid our mortgage, and covered our health insurance. We'll figure it out, he said, but the worry lines around his eyes had deepened. That night, after a quiet dinner where we'd avoided this subject in front of our visiting daughter, we lay in bed calculating numbers. Cobra would cost nearly $2,000 a month to maintain our health coverage. My next oncology appointment was in 2 weeks, with another round of maintenance therapy scheduled. I could sell some paintings, Michael offered. His work had developed a modest following in local galleries, but hardly enough to replace my salary. No, I said firmly. Your art is not our emergency fund. But privately, I wondered how long our actual emergency fund would last with medical bills and everyday expenses. The next morning, I woke early, my body still programmed to its work schedule despite everything. I made coffee and opened my personal laptop at the kitchen table. First, I needed to understand the extent of the damage. I logged into my LinkedIn account to update my profile and found 3 messages from clients who had somehow already heard about my departure. Their confusion was evident. They'd had no warning, no transition plan. Is everything okay? We were counting on your guidance for our summer campaign, wrote the marketing manager from Harbor View Resorts. I crafted careful responses, professional to the end. But each message reinforced the growing knot of anger in my stomach. These were relationships I'd built and nurtured for years, some even during hospital stays, and Richard had severed them without a thought. As I scrolled through my emails, I found a message from Thomas, time stamped 1:23 a.m. Just heard the news. Call me. We need to talk. When I reached him an hour later, his normally calm voice was tight with controlled fury. This is unconscionable, Ellen. The board wasn't consulted about your termination. Richard presented it as a done deal during yesterday's executive briefing. Can they do that? I asked. Fire a director without board approval? Technically, yes. Richard has hiring and firing authority, but it's a terrible decision, and the way he's handling it is even worse. Thomas paused. He's presenting your medical treatments as absenteeism. Medical leave? I never took leave, I protested. I worked through every treatment. I know, but Richard's telling a different story. According to him, your performance has been suffering for months because you've been distracted by personal issues. The injustice of it stole my breath. I had meticulously documented every project, every client interaction, precisely to prevent this kind of misrepresentation. Even on my worst days, when the chemo left me nauseated and exhausted, I'd maintain my responsibilities. There's more, Thomas continued. There's going to be a restructuring of the marketing department. Richard's bringing in someone from his previous company to replace you. Based on the timeline, this has been planned for weeks. The realization hit me like physical pain. I hadn't been fired for performance issues. Those were just the excuse. Richard had wanted me gone from the beginning, had likely been building a case against me while I was fighting for my life. The Strategy Cafe. A week later, I sat in the corner booth of Harborside Cafe, nursing a cup of tea I couldn't taste. My job search was going nowhere. 3 promising interviews had ended with vague promises to be in touch after I disclosed my cancer treatment, never explicitly mentioned as an issue. But the shift in energy was unmistakable. I opened my laptop to check my email, finding a new message from Pinnacle's legal department. They were demanding repayment of salary for hours they claimed I'd improperly logged while attending medical appointments. The vindictiveness was breathtaking and strategically timed when I was most financially vulnerable. Ellen? I thought that was you. I looked up to see Christine Parker, a marketing executive I'd mentored 10 years ago, now CMO at a major resort chain. I heard what happened, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. It's all over the industry. I started to put on a brave face, but something in her kind, direct gaze broke through my defenses. To my horror, tears welled in my eyes. Christine reached across the table and squeezed my hand. No, don't apologize. What they did was shameful. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. Change of plans. We're having an impromptu meeting here. Over the next half hour, 4 more women arrived, all marketing executives I'd worked with, mentored, or helped over my years at Pinnacle. Women now in positions of influence throughout the hospitality industry. We've been comparing notes, said Meredith, now VP of Marketing at a luxury hotel group. Richard Marcus has a history. He did the same thing at Meridian Hotels, cut experienced directors just before their stock options vested, then brought in his own people at lower salaries. Which is exactly what happened to me, I said quietly. My shares would have vested next month. It's worse than that, added Rebecca, who worked with a major industry association. The company that's looking to acquire Pinnacle, Action Hospitality Group, Richard has connections there. He worked with their CEO at Meridian. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Richard was positioning himself for a role in the merged company, making himself valuable by cutting costs and bringing in loyal people. So what do we do? I asked, looking around at these women, once my crutches, now my allies. Christine smiled. We've already started. Rebecca's been quietly speaking with industry contacts about Richard's history. I've documented how he mishandled the transition with your clients, 3 of whom have reached out to me directly with concerns. And I've been in touch with Thomas, Meredith added. He's providing historical performance data that contradicts everything Richard is claiming about the marketing department under your leadership. For the first time in weeks, I felt something unfamiliar. Hope mixed with profound gratitude. I wasn't alone in this fight. The relationships I'd built over decades, the people I'd helped and mentored, were now forming a network of support I hadn't expected. As we strategized over coffee and pastries, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Robert Weston himself, CEO of Weston Hotels, one of Pinnacle's largest clients. Ellen, I just heard about Jenny being fired for questioning the new standardized approach. What the hell is happening at Pinnacle? I gave him a measured response, focusing on organizational changes rather than personal criticisms. This new standardized approach won't work for us, he said flatly. Our hotels are built on unique cultural identities. Cookie-cutter marketing would destroy everything we've built together. I understand your concern, I replied carefully. I want to offer you a position, he continued, surprising me. Director of Marketing for Westin Hotels, working directly with me. We've been impressed with your work for years, regardless of what that new coup claims. The offer was unexpected and precisely timed, a life raft when I most needed one. But there was a complication. Robert, I should be transparent. I'm still undergoing cancer treatment. It hasn't affected my work performance, but my sister is a 5-year breast cancer survivor, he interrupted. We have excellent health coverage and flexible work arrangements. Your health is a priority, not a liability. Tears pricked my eyes at the simple acknowledgement of my humanity. The women around the table, hearing my side of the conversation, were smiling. After the call ended, Christine raised her coffee cup. To new beginnings, and to the power of truth. The truth revealed, after accepting Robert's offer, I opened my laptop that evening to cancel the email I drafted to Pinnacle's investors. With a new job secured, did I still need to send it? As I contemplated, a message arrived from Sarah. Richard just announced a company-wide salary reduction to improve our acquisition profile. Meanwhile, he's getting a retention bonus. People are panicking. I closed the cancellation window. The investors still needed to see the truth, not for my sake now, but for everyone else at Pinnacle who couldn't speak up. The email would send as scheduled. At precisely 9 a.m. the next day, my comprehensive dossier arrived in the inboxes of Pinnacle's 3 major investors. The response was swift and seismic. By 10:30 a.m., Thomas called. The investors are in an emergency meeting with the board. Your email caused quite the firestorm. At noon, Sarah texted. Richard got called into a video conference with the investors. He looked like he was going to be sick. By 3 p.m., Robert forwarded me an email he had received from Pinnacle's lead investor requesting an urgent discussion about Westin Hotel's relationship with the company. Similar emails had apparently gone out to all major clients. At 5:15 p.m., a formal email arrived from Carol Hamilton, the managing partner of Pinnacle's largest investment firm. Ms. Kelly, thank you for bringing these matters to our attention. We take the issues you've raised extremely seriously and have initiated an immediate review. I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you directly. I scheduled the call for the following morning, then turned my attention to preparing for my new position at Westin. Whatever happened at Pinnacle now would happen without my direct involvement. The truth was in the right hands. That evening, as Michael and I discussed my new role over dinner, my phone buzzed with a Pinnacle company-wide email that had been forwarded by multiple former colleagues. Effective immediately, Richard Marcus is no longer with Pinnacle Hospitality Group. The message was brief, corporate, and absolutely devastating in its implications. Truth, it seemed, still had power after all. Epilogue. 6 months later, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my new blazer, bought to celebrate both my final cancer treatment and 6 months at Westin Hotels. My hair was growing back, short and surprisingly silver. I decided against coloring it. The silver felt earned, a badge of both survival and wisdom. My office at Westin overlooked the harbor. On my desk sat a small sculpture Michael had created to mark my cancer-free diagnosis, a bird taking flight, crafted from reclaimed materials. Rising from the ashes, he'd said when he gave it to me. Just like you. Pinnacle's story had continued without me, though I heard the details through various channels. The investors had installed an interim management team and halted the acquisition talks with action. An internal investigation had revealed that Richard's optimization strategy had been specifically designed to inflate short term metrics at the expense of long term client relationships. Several fired employees, including Jenny, had been reinstated with back pay. As for Richard, I heard he had left the state, his reputation in the hospitality industry irrevocably tarnished. The vindication should have felt sweeter, but mostly I felt relief that the harm he'd caused was being repaired. Carol Hamilton had offered me a formal apology and even suggested I return to Pinnacle in an executive role. I had declined politely, having found something better at Weston, a company that valued not just my professional contribution, but my humanity as well. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Don't forget dinner at 7 o'clock. The kids are coming. Mom, too." I smiled, gathering my things. Mom, now in her 80s, had moved in with us after Dad passed. "You took care of me," she'd said when we offered. "Now I get to see you thrive." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A major campaign launch, a potential expansion of Weston's boutique hotel concept to international markets, and a full life beyond cancer and corporate politics. The past couldn't be changed, but it had led me here, to a place where my work was valued, my health was prioritized, and my family drew closer around me. As I turned off the office light, I thought about the document that had changed everything. The complete record, I'd called it. But the complete record of a life is never just about work statistics or corporate achievements. It's about the relationships we build, the truths we tell, and the freedom we find when we finally stand in our full worth. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. Silverline would be an ideal partner, Rebecca Frost says, leaning forward in her chair. "You understand the market. You've worked with many of our remaining clients, and your agency has the stable financial footing that Brightwave currently lacks." I suppress a smile as I absorb the perfect irony of this moment. The same company that discarded me for being too old at 58 is now begging to be rescued by the agency I built from its ashes. My silver gray hair catches the afternoon light streaming through the Victorian windows of my office. 2 years ago, that hair, along with the lines around my eyes and the experience in my hands, was deemed a liability by the very people who now need my help. "I appreciate the call, Rebecca," I say carefully, my voice neutral despite the vindication surging through me. But Silverline isn't looking to acquire other agencies at this time. We're growing organically at a pace that allows us to maintain our culture and values. Rebecca's disappointment is evident but not surprising. We both know she'll report back to Brightwave's investors that their last hope for salvaging what remains of the agency has refused. As she leaves, I find myself reflecting not on Brightwave's downfall, but on the unexpected journey that brought me here, to a place where my age became my greatest asset instead of my greatest liability. Flashback, the dismissal. "We'd like to discuss a transition plan, Judith. It's just not working anymore." Ryan Parker's words hung in the conference room like an uninvited guest, impossible to ignore. I sat at the head of the table I had personally selected when we moved into these offices 8 years ago. My knuckles turned white as I gripped my coffee mug with our original logo, my design, now faded from hundreds of washings. Time seemed to slow as I looked at my younger partners. Ryan, with his expensive watch glinting as he fidgeted, and Taylor, whose fresh from the salon hair fell perfectly as she tilted her head with practiced concern. I'd mentored them both, shared client relationships, taught them everything they knew about strategic marketing. Now they were pushing me out of the company I had built. "The industry is changing rapidly," Ryan continued, his voice smoothly professional. "We need to present a more contemporary image." "Contemporary?" I repeated. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "Exactly," Taylor chimed in, almost relieved I'd caught on so quickly. "More modern, more youthful, more in tune with emerging trends and digital native sensibilities." As they spoke, my mind flashed back to the day I hired Ryan. Fresh out of his MBA program, eager and bright, but completely lacking in real-world experience. I'd seen something in him, a hunger for success, perhaps, that reminded me of myself at that age. I'd taken him under my wing, introduced him to our biggest clients, showed him how relationship building was the true foundation of our business. I pioneered our company's expansion into digital marketing before either of you had graduated college, I said, keeping my voice even. I secured the Harrington account when you were still posting party photos on Facebook, Ryan. I developed the Legacy Forward campaign strategy that won us 3 industry awards last year. But I had committed the unforgivable sin in advertising. I had aged. I thought about my late husband, James, who had always told me I grew more beautiful with each passing year. Your eyes hold more wisdom now, he'd say, tracing the fine lines at their corners. Why would anyone want to erase that? He died 5 years ago, just as Brightwave was reaching its peak. I never had time to properly grieve. There was always another pitch, another client, another campaign deadline. Ryan slid a folder across the table. We're prepared to offer you a buyout package. We think it's quite generous considering. I opened it without changing my expression. The amount they offered was barely a third of what my equity stake was actually worth. From the conference room windows, I could see the lake in the distance, where just last summer we'd hosted a company sailing day. I remembered how everyone had applauded when I announced our best quarter ever. I closed the folder and caught a glimpse of their new branding mock-up on Taylor's tablet. They'd already started redesigning the company image without me. I'll need time to review this, I said, rising from my chair with as much dignity as I could muster. Of course, Taylor replied, not quite meeting my eyes. Take the weekend. I nodded and walked out, feeling their relief at my back. They were relieved I hadn't made a scene. Relieved I hadn't cried. Relieved they were one step closer to erasing my existence from the company I had built. That night, strategic planning. As I drove home that evening, memories flooded back of all I'd sacrificed for Brightwave. The vacations cut short, the weekends spent working, the video calls with my daughter in Europe that I'd rescheduled too many times. My marriage had been another casualty. James had supported my ambition, but even he had grown tired of coming second to the agency. You're building something beautiful, he'd said during our last real conversation before his illness took him. But you've stopped building us. He'd been right. I'd chosen the company, and now the company was choosing not to have me. My house felt particularly empty that night. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and stepped out onto my back porch, staring at the garden I never had enough time to properly tend. The irony wasn't lost on me. All the hours I'd given to Brightwave, and now I'd have nothing but time. Sleep eluded me. Instead, I found myself in my home office at 3 a.m. pulling out files, reviewing contracts, and examining legal documents. My father, a contract lawyer, had always told me to read the fine print. Details matter, Jude, he'd say. The big picture is made up of countless small decisions. Tonight, his voice seemed to echo in my head as I methodically reviewed 15 years of paperwork. By dawn, I'd made several important discoveries. First, I still personally owned the trademark to Authentic Legacy Forward Thinking, our most successful campaign slogan, which we'd begun using as our agency tagline. I'd registered it under my name 2 years ago when I'd first noticed Ryan and Taylor huddled together too often, speaking in whispers that stopped when I approached. My mother's voice came to me then. Always trust your instincts, Judith. When something doesn't feel right, it usually isn't. She'd raised 3 children while managing a small bookstore, teaching me early that women often had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. Second, our 4 largest clients, Harrington Financial, Westfield Manufacturing, Crescent Healthcare, and Northern Outfitters, all had clauses in their contracts requiring notification if the agency underwent significant management changes. These were relationships I'd built personally over many years. The contracts even named me specifically as their account lead. Third, I'd never signed a non-compete agreement. In our early days, we'd been too busy building the business to worry about such technicalities. And later, well, I suppose no one had imagined I'd ever leave. The sun was rising as I made coffee, my mind surprisingly clear. I remembered something my grandmother used to say. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away with grace and then build something better. I thought about fighting. I could hire lawyers, threaten litigation, make things messy and public. I could force them to pay me what my stake was truly worth. But that would be giving them more of my precious time and energy, and they'd already taken enough. Instead, I did something that would later confuse Ryan and Taylor greatly. I signed their lowball offer without negotiation. I cleaned out my office over the weekend when no one was there. I sent a brief, professional email to the staff announcing my departure, thanking them for their contributions. And on Monday morning, when Ryan and Taylor expected protest or tears, I handed over the signed paperwork, shook their hands, and said with perfect sincerity, "I truly wish you the best." The look of confusion on their faces was small, but it was my first victory. 3 weeks later, new beginnings. You did what? My sister Ruth nearly shouted into the phone. Judith, they completely undervalued your stake. You built that company. I held the phone away from my ear as I watered the hanging basket on my porch. 3 weeks had passed since I'd walked out of Brightway for the last time, and already my garden was looking better. I'd slept more in those 3 weeks than I had in the previous 3 months. Ruth had always been my protector, even though she was only a year older. Growing up, she'd confront anyone who dared to slight me. Now retired from her position as a high school principal, she still had that fierce protective instinct. "I know exactly what I built, Ruth," I replied, keeping my voice even. "And I know exactly what it's worth." "Then why?" "Because fighting would have meant staying in their story," I explained. "I'm more interested in writing my own." After another 15 minutes of trying to convince my sister I hadn't lost my mind, I ended the call and checked my email. There was a message from Walter Shields, CEO of Shields Manufacturing and one of Brightwave's oldest clients. "Judith, I was surprised to hear about your departure. The young woman they've assigned to our account seems knowledgeable, but I'd prefer to discuss our upcoming rebrand with someone who understands our company history. Are you consulting independently now? If so, I'd like to meet." I smiled. Walter's message was the third such inquiry I'd received this week. I hadn't reached out to any of them. I didn't need to. Word travels fast in Madison's business community. Walter had taken over Shields Manufacturing from his father, just as I was starting my career. We'd grown our businesses in parallel, facing similar challenges, he in balancing tradition with innovation in manufacturing, me in an industry that constantly reinvented itself. Our mutual respect had evolved into a friendship that extended beyond business. That afternoon, I met with Samantha Green, my attorney, to finalize the paperwork for my new venture, Silverline Strategies. Samantha had navigated her own path through a male-dominated legal world, building a respected practice while raising 2 children on her own after her divorce. We'd met at a women's business luncheon 10 years ago and had immediately connected. "I like it," Samantha said, looking over the documents. Subtle but pointed. "I thought so," I replied. "And you're clear on the operational boundaries?" "No direct solicitation of Brightwave clients as agreed in my separation terms." "I won't need to solicit," I added. "They're already calling me." Samantha smiled. She was about my age and understood exactly what I was facing. "Just be careful. Your former partners struck me as the type who bruise easily when their plans don't unfold exactly as expected." Ryan had grown up privileged, the son of a banking executive who had smoothed his way through life. He'd never faced real failure or rejection. Taylor came from a different background. She'd worked hard to overcome gender barriers in marketing, but somewhere along the way, she decided that aligning with Ryan's vision was the path of least resistance. I'd seen her potential, her creative spark, but she'd gradually subsumed it to Ryan's more aggressive ambition. "They'll be fine," I said. They wanted youth and energy, and that's what they have. Whether that's what their clients want is another matter entirely. 6 weeks later, the confrontation. My new office space was intentionally different from Brightway's sleek, open concept design. I leased a converted Victorian house on Madison's east side with hardwood floors, large windows, and a wraparound porch where clients could sit with coffee and discuss their marketing needs in comfortable wicker chairs. It reminded me of my grandmother's house, where I'd spent summers as a child, feeling safe and valued. Within 6 weeks, I'd hired 4 staff members, 2 experienced designers who had previously freelanced for me, a brilliant content strategist who'd been overlooked for promotion at a larger agency, and an office manager who kept everything running smoothly. We were small but efficient, focusing exclusively on high-value clients who appreciated strategic thinking over flashy trends. One afternoon, after a successful presentation to Shields Manufacturing, I returned to find Ryan pacing in our small conference room, his perfectly tailored suit looking somewhat wilted after what had clearly been a stressful day. "This is how you repay us?" he demanded without preamble. "Stealing our clients?" I studied him for a moment. I remembered the eager young man who had once asked me endless questions about client psychology and brand positioning. Somewhere along the way, that curious learner had been replaced by this entitled businessman who believed he deserved success without putting in the years of relationship building. "I haven't stolen anyone, Ryan," I replied calmly. "Clients make their own decisions about which agencies best serve their needs. Shields Manufacturing was with Brightway for 12 years. No, I corrected him. Shields was with me for 12 years. There's a difference, which you're now discovering." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "And Harrington Financial is reviewing their options. And Crescent Healthcare hasn't returned our calls in 2 weeks. This isn't a coincidence. Perhaps they're not responding to your new contemporary approach," I suggested. His eyes narrowed. "We were trying to do the right thing, Judith. The industry is changing. Clients want fresh perspectives, digital natives." "Apparently not all clients," I interrupted. "Some still value experience, strategic thinking, and long-standing relationships." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Now, was there something specific you wanted to discuss?" "I have a rather full afternoon." He remained standing. "We want you to stop using Brightwave in your credentials. Stop mentioning that you founded our company when you pitch to clients." I couldn't help but laugh. For a fleeting moment, I saw uncertainty flash across Ryan's face, the same look he'd had during his first major presentation when he'd forgotten his opening lines, and I'd subtly prompted him from the back of the room. "You want me to erase 15 years of my professional life because it's inconvenient for you? That's not how reality works, Ryan. We'll take legal action if necessary," he threatened. "I look forward to that discussion," I replied, "especially when your lawyer explains how you're using my trademark tagline without permission." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" "Check your inbox," I said. "Your counsel should have received our cease and desist letter about 20 minutes ago." 1 year later, full circle 1 year after my unceremonious exit from Brightwave, I received an invitation that brought everything full circle. The Madison Business Association wanted to honor me with their Lifetime Achievement Award at their annual gala. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered business leaders of Madison, I saw many familiar faces. Walter Shields and Catherine Morrison were seated at a front table. Abby Cohen sat with our Silverline team, beaming proudly. Even Samantha had come, despite her general aversion to networking events. In the back corner, I spotted Taylor, now Brightwave's managing partner following the company's restructuring. Ryan was conspicuously absent, having been ousted by investors when the agency's finances collapsed. Our eyes met briefly, and I gave Taylor a small nod, which she returned after a moment's hesitation. I thought about my daughter, Claire, who couldn't be here tonight but had sent flowers to my office with a note. "Mom, I'm so proud of you for showing them what real experience looks like. Maybe now we can finally have that trip to Italy we've been talking about for years?" She was right. It was time to use some of my success to rebuild the personal connections I'd neglected. When I was asked to leave the company I founded at age 58, I began. I was told that the industry needed a more contemporary image. My wrinkles and gray hair apparently didn't fit the vision my younger partners had for the future. A murmur ran through the audience. I could have fought. I could have sued. I could have made things messy in public, I continued. Instead, I chose to channel my energy into building something new, something that embraced the value of experience while still welcoming fresh perspectives. I gestured to our Silverline table, where our diverse teams sat together. In just 1 year, Silverline Strategies has become one of the fastest growing agencies in the region, with a client waitlist that now extends to 9 months. We've won multiple industry awards, expanded to 15 employees, and most importantly, we've proven that effective marketing isn't about the age of the marketers. It's about understanding the needs of the clients and their customers. I paused, thinking of James, who would have loved to see this moment. My late husband once told me that true success isn't measured by how high you climb, but by how true you stay to yourself while climbing. Silverline is the most authentic work I've ever done, because it honors every stage of my professional journey, including the wisdom that only comes with time. The applause was thunderous as I accepted the award, a beautiful crystal sculpture that now sits in Silverline's reception area. A reminder that sometimes the most effective revenge is simply outshining those who underestimated you. Present day. The garden view. After Rebecca leaves, I sit in my office looking out at the garden we've planted behind our Victorian house office. The late afternoon sunlight filters through the trees, casting dappled shadows on our patio where two team members are discussing ideas for a client presentation. I feel no satisfaction in Brightwave's struggles. What I feel is gratitude for the journey that has led me here, to a place where I could build something true to myself, surrounded by people who value what I bring to the table, wrinkles and all. My phone buzzes with a text from Claire. Flight booked for next month. Can't wait to see you and the famous Silverline office's mom. Dad would be so proud. I smile, realizing that my second act has given me more than professional validation. It's given me the chance to reclaim parts of my life I'd set aside for too long. When I left Brightwave, I hadn't set out for revenge. I had simply refused to accept the narrative that my age made me less valuable. In doing so, I had written a new story, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been told they were past their prime when their best work was still ahead of them. My grandmother was right. Sometimes walking away with grace and building something better is the most powerful response of all.